Okay. So our goals here are the same as they have been. We're going to produce an equivalent form of an expression by factoring, because that's what we've been doing, and we're going to solve quadratic equations, which we've also been doing. And so I don't have this up on the screen, but you've seen this slide several times before. We've already solved by square root. Now we're factoring. Yet to come here is completing the square and quadratic formula. Okay? So has anybody ever watched Shark Tank? We're addicted to it at our house. Like there's, I think, reruns on, I think it's MSNBC. MSNBC, is that the right channel? I don't know. Anyway, they're on like every night for 4 straight hours. So in the last like month, I think I've watched like 800 episodes. Anyway, so you go on Shark Tank for your new invention. And based on the publicity, your sales are represented by this equation. And X is the number of months since Shark Tank. We want to solve to find out how many months until we break even. So very first question that I have for you is, what does break even mean?
Get our money back. Yeah.
Get your money back. Okay? Well, sort of. Okay? What equals what when you break even?
0 equals 0.
Okay, 0 equals 0. What else, like in terms of, say, a business? You're not in debt anymore, but you haven't made anything also, right? Okay, so the 0 equals 0 thing is kind of a key piece, though. So let's check this out. We want to know when this equation right here is going to equal 0. So over on that board, I have this question for you before we get started. What does it mean to solve a quadratic equation? And some things to consider are roots, zeros, and maybe that graph. So I want you to take a moment and chat with your neighbor about what you think it means to solve a quadratic equation. Go.
Where the thing crosses the y-intercept is or maybe it's where the
Edward Jones.
What do we come up with?
We don't know. If you solve the equation, that's quadratic.
Oh, it's not for real.
What do we got?
Huh?
What do we got?
I said when you find the variables or the x's in the equation.
Okay. What equals 0? Okay. All right. So we got some groups that have some ideas. We got some groups, unfortunately, that don't have any ideas. Okay? Delaney, will you share with us what your group came up with?
We said it's
Where x equals 0. Okay, so look on the graph over there on that board. Okay. Could somebody go up to that graph and point where they see x equals 0? Okay. That's where x equals 0. It's also called what?
y-intercept.
The y-intercept. Okay. Dane, what did your group come up with?
Find the x in the equation.
Find the x in the equation. That does what? Okay. So we've got some interesting ideas happening here. Okay. But here's what I think we should maybe focus on. Okay. And you're real close to being right on track. These zeros are not going to be here. They're going to be there. Okay? Now, if you remember, we talked about for an equation, let's pretend that I just use the same equation that we have over there on our board, plus 7x. When I set this equal to 0, remember that this is really a y value on my graph. And my y value then ends up being 0 at this point. Let's pretend that this is the point negative 4, comma 0. Okay? So when we solve something, very first, we're trying to make our equation true. Second, we're trying to find a x value for when my y value is 0. Okay? So that's what we're doing when we solve. Back to how we solve. Okay? The good news is we've already been doing this. My first step is to factor. Okay? My second step is zero product property. Okay? So I'm going to walk us through how I would solve this problem, and then we have a couple that we can practice. Okay? So remember that we talked about two different options. Option 1 was kind of with the box in the area. Option 2 was multiplying A and C and finding our factors and doing GCF. That's how I'm going to proceed. Okay? So I'm going to take A times C, which is 2 times negative 15, and I'm going to get negative 30. Then I'm going to list all the factors that would give me negative 30. And I'm looking for this set of factors here that's going to add up to my bx term. So I'm looking for the one that'll give me positive 7, and I notice that is negative 3 and positive 10. Then I'm going to rewrite my original, replacing my bx term with my new factors. So 2x squared minus 3x plus 10x minus 15 equals 0. And step 3 says that I'm going to split this in half. I'm going to factor the greatest common factor out of each half. So I've got an x that I can take out of each of those. And I'm left with 2x minus 3. And over here, I've got a 5. And I can factor out. And what's left is 2x minus 3. And notice that that equals 0. Good news here. My first checkpoint to know that if I did this right or not, these parentheses, they're the same. So I know that's one of my factors. And then what's left is my other factor, so x plus 5. And I still have that equals 0. Okay? Now the zero product property says this. If A times B equals 0, then we know that either A equals 0 or B equals 0. So at this point, I'm able to take each parenthesis and set it equal to 0 and solve. So x would equal negative 5 or 2x minus 3 equals 0. And when I solve, x is going to equal 1.5. So I know that we kind of got small there at the bottom of the board. Okay. Now, as a refresher, now that I'm done solving, remember that my two different answers here are numbers that I could plug back into my original equation. So if I said I'm going to plug in negative 5 into this original equation, it will make this be a true statement. It will give me 0 when I plug it in. If I plug in 1.5 into that equation, I would get 0 as a result. It makes the equation true. Okay? So we've solved it. If I were actually answering this Shark Tank question, would it make any sense for -5 months to be a break-even point? No. So a lot of times when we solve these story problems, some of our answers just kind of automatically don't make any sense to the problem and we disregard them. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make it true. It just, in this case, doesn't make any sense. Okay? So this would say that in 1.5 months since you went on Shark Tank, you broke even and you're starting to make some pretty good money. That's kind of cool. Okay? So, to practice, what I want you to do is look at this guy over here. 4x squared minus 13x equals 12. Okay? So, one of the things that I want to caution you on that comes up and can happen is that guy set up and ready for us to solve? How come?
Equals 12.
Yeah, it equals 12 and there's no C term. Or in that case, my C term's on the wrong side. So what do I have to do first? Okay? So go ahead, see if you can practice that one. I don't care whether you proceed with option 1 or option 2. But after you get it factored, you can try doing the zero product property.
So you don't care if we do the box?
Absolutely not. Okay? So go ahead, you're working on your own first. Okay, time out. I got to put a pause on things just real quick once. Okay? So we talked about how this thing, this 12, it's not necessarily in the right spot. What do I got to do? Got to move it. Well, how? So I got to have all my pieces lined up where they go. And then I get my equals 0 by doing so. So if I subtract 12 from 12 on the right side, yeah, it absolutely equals 0. Okay, now I am set up and ready to solve. So if these things don't equal 0, we're not ready to go. Okay? Hi, Maddie. How are you?
Huh?
How are you?
I'm swell.
Okay. So go ahead. Proceed from here. If you were already going, keep going.
Am I doing this? I don't think I'm doing this.
Let's look.
I got 48.
Okay, so first of all, which option are you doing?
2. The long one.
Okay. So you...
Did 4 times 12.
Right, but did you move your 12 first?
No. But what would I do if I did move by 12? Minus 12. Yeah.
So are you really looking for factors of positive 48?
Negative 48?
Okay.
So you just solve the last two equations?
So then you got these two factors, and those two factors are doing what to this 13x?
Making it positive?
Those
Those two.
are the same exact thing as that, right?
Yeah, I'm just
So
adding it.
But do you need to include that any longer?
No,
How come?
because it's gone, because that's the same thing.
Okay.
Was that right when I was looking for negative 48, or is that wrong? Right? I can't find the one that adds up to it.
What are you looking for to add up to, though?
12.
Mm.
Oh, wait, no, 13.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I got these to this.
what's your sign right there in front of 16? So you want that to be a minus right there. So,
Then that one.
yep.